طويل الشوق يبقى في اغترابي، فقير في الحياة من الصحاب. ومن يأمنك يا دنيا الدواهي، تدوسين المصاحب بالتراب.
So I'm going to talk about what I've done since I've left Broadhead, and what I'm doing right now and what I hope to do for the future. And then I'm going to give some basic information about Islam and what Islam means and the difference between the religion and the people. And that's very important. That's an important aspect for anything in life, I think, because a lot of times people get lumped into one group, and some people say that that's what it is, when actually the religion might be showing something different, or whatever it is that people are involved in. The principles might be different. Okay, so I'm going to start out with a little bit of a trivia question and see if some of you might know this. I know there's some people in the room that might know this. There's in about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, there was a martial arts school here. And I was wondering if anybody happened to know, here in Broadhead, happened to know where that school was. This was before the martial arts, that was the Taekwondo that was in the Broadhead Fitness Center. Anybody have any idea? Yeah.
Was it back behind the bike shop?
There you go. That's it. That's right. So you might be wondering why I'm starting out with this question, but I'm going to get to it. So that's exactly right. It was behind the bike shop. There's a white brick building that's attached to the bike shop in the rear, and Julio Rodriguez used to have a dental office. And if you face the front door, it's the brown portion behind the bike shop. Then it's to the left, and that's where the martial arts studio was. Well, the summer of my junior year, I decided to start practicing martial arts and train in martial arts. And so when I went to the school, the first thing that they asked me to do was to take my shoes off. Okay, so that was a little bit strange for me, being just a junior in high school, and I'm used to wearing my shoes everywhere, no matter where I go, in my house, everywhere I go. So that was a little peculiar for me. Of course I did it. Then the next thing I was asked to do was to bow to the room before I entered the room to start practicing martial arts. And now that was really strange, because most of us, we have respect for humans and animals, nature, but to have that level of respect for a room, for a building, was very peculiar for me, but it made me start thinking more deeply about things and about different cultures in different ways. So I left Broadhead and went to Beloit College. I was actually still living here on the weekends with my parents, but I attended Beloit College, and I met a Muslim woman at the residence hall where we stayed, and she was from Kuwait. So I learned a little bit about what she believes in her religion. And the first year of my time at Beloit College, the second semester, there was a class being offered called World Religions. Now this class offered 3 subjects: Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam. So now we're getting back to my martial arts experience, because in martial arts, it was a Korean martial arts, and I started learning a little bit about Buddhism, not necessarily because that's what they taught in the martial arts school, but because it was related. I wanted to learn a little bit about the culture of Korea, and many Koreans are Buddhists. And then I met this Muslim woman, so one of the subjects was Islam, and I wanted to learn more about the basics of Islam. As a Christian, I knew the basics of Christianity. I was a Lutheran. I went to Bethlehem Lutheran Church before I became Muslim. And of course, I knew some basics about Judaism because of that as well. So when I took the class, I realized that Islam was very close to Christianity. And I found that very strange. I had never learned that. I didn't know that. And that it's one of the Abrahamic faiths. It comes from Abraham. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all come from Abraham. So that really intrigued me and made me want to learn more. So when I continued through Beloit, I was asking a lot of Muslims questions, talking with Muslims, and also learning about different things from material I was reading. Now, one thing I had to make sure that I did was, after taking that class, I had to make sure that I kept the people who were a part of the religion separate from the religion itself. Why did I have to do that? Because if I was going to learn about something, I needed to make sure I focused on that subject rather than looking at what the people did. Because a lot of times the people aren't doing what is expected in the religion or whatever principles that religion is saying that should be applied. So many of the Muslims, they were doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and they were not doing things that were mandatory in religion. So I made sure that what I learned in that class and the materials that I was reading was really what I should focus on. So throughout the 4 years, I was learning some basics, and then I attended graduate school at Miami University in Ohio. It's just north of Cincinnati. And so I started thinking more along the professional level, because as soon as I finished my master's degree, I wasn't planning on going on to earn my PhD. So I knew that I had to start practicing what I was doing as a profession. I was studying preventive health, exercise and health studies. But some of the things that the professors were saying made me think more about my spiritual journey. And one of the things that was mentioned was, another trivia question here. How is it that most people transmit illnesses or disease between each other? Hands. That's right. So the professors were telling me that many physicians around the world say that if people just wash their hands more often, there would be less illness and disease in the world. Okay? So again, I thought about Islam, because in Islam you have to wash your hands, your face, your feet before you pray. And Muslims have to pray 5 times a day. So I thought, oh, Muslims must be pretty healthy if that's if they're doing it that often. That must be pretty healthy. So the second thing that many professors were talking about was regarding stress management. And there's 2 basic things that the professors were saying to reduce your level of negative anxiety and to be more stress-free. One of the things is for people to have time management. Make sure you're organized throughout the day. The second thing is to have some type of practice that you do every day to be relaxed. And so some of those ideas might be to exercise every day. Another idea might be to meditate, something along those lines. So I thought about the prayer in Islam and what I had learned for 4 years, just some very simple studying. And I realized that in the prayer, it's, as I said just a little bit ago, you have to pray 5 times a day, but it's not all at once. It's spread out throughout the day. So you have a morning prayer, a noon prayer, afternoon, and then at sunset, and then the last one about an hour and a half, an hour after sunset. So it was very organized throughout the day, and when a Muslim prays, they have to pray so that they're so focused. If somebody comes into the room and tries to talk with them, you have to focus on your prayer, and you can't stop your prayer and have a conversation. Unless, of course, it's an emergency. I mean, there are situations where that requires you to stop what you're doing. Because of this, and one more fact that a professor brought to our attention in a class that I was taking at graduate school. He came into the class and he was talking to us, to the students, and he said, you know, I just came across a study, and I need to ask you, could there be any reason for this study that you can think of? Any type of what they call a third variable that can explain this study. Now, it was a reliable and valid study. It was a very strong study. And what they did was they had some patients in a hospital who were suffering from some kind of illness. And then they took at least three different groups. One of the groups just prayed for one of the people or one group of people. Another group just thought about the person, another person or another group of people. And then there was a final group that didn't do anything. It's called a placebo, is what they call in research. They just want to see if there's some kind of effect. And what they found was, of these three groups, and there may have been more groups, but what they found was the group that prayed for those particular group of people, those people improved in their health. They became better. Significantly. It was a significant difference. So the professor asked us, do you have any explanation for this? Well, just like all of you, everybody sat quiet, and they didn't know what the answer was. Even with all of our studying, and we're thinking, we're students, we're really intelligent, we're studying our master's degree, So one of the students was smart enough to ask him, what do you think the answer is? Is there a reason for it? And he said, this one has me dumbfounded. I don't know what to say about it. So that was kind of that's what really made the biggest difference for me, because again, it was focused on research and it was focused on the prayer. And I thought, if Muslims are praying 5 times a day, and it's mandatory for 5 prayers, that's a lot of times, and the emphasis is on prayer. It's focusing on God and trying to pray and make that established in your life. So I thought, well, if Muslims are clean, like I thought they were with washing hands and face and feet, if they're stress-free and they're also focused on prayer, then maybe I should become a Muslim, because if I'm going to practice this profession properly, it sounds like, as far as the religion goes, this is a very healthy religion, and it made sense to me. So halfway through graduate school, I accepted Islam, and I became a Muslim. And soon after that, well, I finished that calendar year from 1995 to 96. I came back to Wisconsin, and I had an internship at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point for an academic year at the clinic at the University of Wisconsin, so Stevens Point. And after that, I went to Atlanta. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. Most of my time as a Muslim in the United States for 7 years, so it was in Atlanta. And so most of the Muslims I know are there. And I don't know as many Muslims here in Wisconsin, because I lived in Atlanta from 96 to 2003, then I moved overseas. In Atlanta, as I said, I moved there in the summer of 96. So this is a very, very exciting time for many people in Atlanta. The economy was booming. It was a very popular city, large city. There were a lot of job opportunities. I had a job before I went there, so it was a great opportunity. And also the Olympics were coming to Atlanta in August of 96. So my ex-wife, my wife at the time, and her brother-in-law, we decided to go to Atlanta, go to the Olympic Park one night. And we went to the park, and we were walking around. We realized there was a concert on stage, so we wanted to watch the concert, looking for a place to sit. And we noticed that on top of a little hill below a TV tower, there are TV towers at the top, there were a couple of benches, very long benches, so there was nobody sitting there. So we said, that's a great place to see it. It's right in front of right facing the stage and right near the stage, so we thought it would be a good place to watch the concert. Within minutes after sitting down, there was a security guard that came and asked us to move. He was trying to keep the area clear. We didn't ask why. We moved on. And we walked around the park. We went to an ATM machine. I took out some money. We walked out of the park. And there was a building about a block away called the House of Blues. And we were going to stay there for a little bit. There's somebody performing there. I forgot his name, James Braun, performing there. So we thought it would be great to see him, because it's getting late. He's probably finishing his performance soon. And his bus was right across the street, so we stood by the bus, had his name on it and everything. We were hoping we might be able to see him. And within a short amount of time, we heard this loud boom. And everybody's looking around. We don't hear those kinds of things in the U.S. very often. And so everybody was a little bit nervous about that kind of sound. Within a few minutes after that, two people in military uniforms and camouflage uniforms came sprinting by us. And so I looked at my wife at the time, brother-in-law, and I said, you know, we should probably get out of here, and might be a good idea. So we went to the subway and got in the car and drove back to our home. We were listening to the radio, and a lot of people were calling in and telling about their experience, talking about what happened, what it could have been, you know, as they do on radio and TV. So when we got back to our home, I thought it would be a good idea just to call in and tell about our experience, because everybody else was doing it, might as well. And so I called the radio station, and they put me on hold, and the next person I talked to was a GBI agent. Now, the GBI is the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. It's a local FBI. And he asked a few basic questions, but they were pretty busy at the time, so he said, we'll call you back. Got my information, my contact information, called me back, to call me back. Well, 1 year later, in 1997, in the summer of 97, I got a phone call from an FBI agent asking me and my wife to come in and bring any pictures we have. So I thought that was odd. So we came in, and he said it was related to the Olympic Park bombing. So we went in and to the office, and he was asking us all the questions that he needed to ask, and looking at our pictures, showing us pictures. And basically we said, well, this is 1 year later. There's not a lot we can remember as far as details regarding this incident. And so I said before the end of the interview, why are you calling me so late? I talked to a GBI agent. They said they would contact me, and this is the next call we've gotten a year later. He said, well, we got your information from the ATM machine, and so we called you up. And so they were going through all the records of the ATM machine. They were, and here was a phone call I'd made already. So it was, and this was about the time, I don't know if any of you remember, there was an individual named Richard Jewell. He was basically, the media was camped out in front of his house. He ended up losing his job. It was a difficult time for him at that time, and I was asking him some questions about that as well, what was going on. And so this is 97, and in 1998, there was a bombing at an abortion clinic in Alabama, and another one at Atlanta, a gay and lesbian dance club in Atlanta. So does anybody happen to know or remember who was the person that was charged, accused of these bombings?
Randolph, wasn't it?
Who's that? Yeah, that's right. Randolph, close. Eric Robert Rudolph. And of course I know, because I've been keeping up with him over the years, and he's written memoirs and everything, so it had a real impact in my life, and I've spent a lot of time talking about it for a reason, because about a decade later, I became inspired to do something about something like what happened to me, or being a survivor of a terrorist attack, a religious terrorist attack, or by a terrorist attack by a religious person. So, so in '98 he bombed those two places, and he may have bombed one other place. He wasn't caught until 5 years later, when I was in Medina, Saudi Arabia, and I had just told some friends about my experience. And somebody within a few days handed me a newspaper in English, and said, and there it was right there. Eric Robert Rudolph was caught in the Smoky Mountains 5 years after his last bombing. And so, it's just been following me around throughout my life, this whole incident, and so it really had an impact on me, especially in the future. In 2003, I decided to leave Atlanta and go study overseas. And the reason why was because as a new Muslim, and I think this is the case probably with many people, if they change their religion or they change something about their life, a lot of people were telling me, this is the religion, no, this is the religion, being pulled back and forth by different groups, different individuals, trying to tell you exactly what it is. Well, the only way to really learn anything is to get an education, right? I mean, that's the best way. I mean, you can get an experience, of course, but sometimes the experience isn't necessarily based on facts, based on other people's experience. By studying it, you get a bigger picture and a better idea of what it is. So, since I thought that studying the Arabic language is an important part of this process, I wanted to leave and go overseas. Anybody who's studied language, or if you know anybody that has at a university, once you've reached a certain level, then you really should spend some time in that country of the language you're trying to learn to really get a grasp of it, to learn how to speak it, write it, read it, and engulf yourself in the process. So I decided to go to Saudi Arabia in 2003 and study the Quran. And it's not the Quran that you see here, of course, as I showed you in the English language. It's in the Arabic language, like I wrote up here. So that takes quite a bit of intense study because the language is very different. Obviously, it's not like Spanish or French. It's not in English letters, so it takes more time. Also, in the Arabic language, I'll give you an example. If you want to ask somebody, where are you from, you're going to say, min aina ant. And so if we translate that directly, min is from, aina is where, and ant is you. From where you. So now you get an idea, when you learn the Arabic language and trying to translate it into my natural language, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of practice. So the Quran is like learning Shakespeare for maybe an Arab coming over here. It's old English, we don't speak it anymore, so it takes more time. And so that's why I started with the Quran, learning how to read it and memorize it properly with the right pronunciation. And that's where I started in Saudi Arabia. After 2 months in Saudi Arabia, I didn't spend much time there. I met a scholar there and studied under him. After about 2 months in Mecca and Jeddah, I moved to Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and I continued my studies there, learning how to read and recite Quran, read and memorize Quran. And I was in Dubai for about a year, and I was offered the opportunity to move to Yemen. And so to learn the Arabic language in Dubai is very difficult. What you see in the magazines is, and newspapers, the very glitzy part of Dubai, that's there. There's opportunities to learn there as well, learn Quran more specifically. But Arabic is difficult because most of the Arabs, once they find out you speak English, they want to speak English because it's the language of business over there. And they're very much involved in trading and in business. And most of Dubai is Indian. They're Indians from India, so there's a lot of Hindi or Indian language being spoken. So it's not a great opportunity to learn how to speak, read, or write. So I moved to Yemen, and I'm still living in Dubai. I've been living in Dubai. I have a place there for 10 years, but I've been going around studying in between. And I was in Yemen for 2 years, studying the Arabic language from 2004 to 2006. Then I moved back to Dubai, and this is where I started to see what I can do in the future, and what I can do to try to help with certain problems that are occurring in the world today. The scholar that I had studied under in Mecca, he knew a person from Toronto, Canada, and he was a new Muslim, a Caucasian new Muslim like myself. He wanted to come to Dubai and meet me and raise some money for his organization. The name of the organization, maybe you've read about it already, but name of the organization is called Paradise Forever, which is P4E support group. And so we met, and he started to tell me about what he's planning to do with the organization and his goals, his vision. The main vision was to inspire, support, and educate new Muslims. The organization in Canada, he wanted to help Muslims in general and be a humanitarian organization, help people in general, not just Muslims, but specifically new Muslims, and especially to try to educate new Muslims. Because as I realized, and many new Muslims realize, is if you just listen to what people are saying, you might not get the right picture or learn the right thing about Islam. So we thought that by educating new Muslims, they will be able to stay away from extreme elements within the religion, extreme Muslims. And that way, so that way they can have a more balanced approach to the religion and to life in general. Be good citizens, be good members of a particular community, and also be a good Muslim all at the same time. Now, there's a concept that maybe you've seen in the media, something called a madrasa. Has anybody heard of madrasa? It's an Islamic school, and sometimes the media tries to make it sound like this is they're training evil people here, they're training them to be terrorists, and this is a big problem. But actually, most schools, most madrasas are very helpful, and they're training Muslims, new Muslims and all Muslims, in a moderate way of Islam, in a traditional form of Islam. So we wanted to do that and get them involved with the scholars in Toronto and wherever we established P4E. And part of the reason also was because of this problem with terrorism that keeps coming up regarding Muslims, and sometimes it's being related to Islam. So in 2007, I established P4E here in the United States. I established it as a nonprofit corporation within Wisconsin so that we can be a part of this process. And obviously, some of the things that he was telling me, it inspired me because of my experience in Atlanta at the Olympic Park and what had happened there. Because I realized that it's not just a Muslim problem. It's a problem within all religions. You know, there's no Christian that would say that the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, is legitimate Christians. Most of them will say they aren't. But a Ku Klux Klan member might say, yeah, we're Christian, we believe in this is the right way. But there are Muslims that do that. There are Buddhists that do that. There are Hindus, there are Jews that do that. So we thought that it would be important to do our part in making sure that Muslims are productive members and staying away from these extreme, radical, violent elements, especially on the internet. It happens quite a bit with new Muslims and Muslims who are starting to practice their religion. Maybe they were born into a Muslim family, but they're not practicing it. They decide they want to practice. They see a lot of emotional videos, read a lot of emotional things on the internet. Maybe they get in contact with the wrong group or individual. So this requires some understanding of what are the facts behind terrorism and how involved are Muslims in terrorism. Does anybody know what the FBI shows regarding terrorist acts in the United States and the percentages of terrorist acts within different groups? Okay, I figured that one. Got you on that one, so. You're answering pretty well up until then. All right. So from 1980 until 2005, and this is on FBI.gov, www.fbi.gov, they show 25 years of terrorist attacks in the United States. Now, of all the terrorist attacks, 6% of those terrorist attacks are committed by Muslims. Okay? That means 94% are by non-Muslims. What is the percentage breakdown of the non-Muslims? 42% are done by Latinos or Latino groups within this 25-year time period. 42%. And again, this is from FBI.gov, www.fbi.gov. Now, that might seem strange. With terrorist attacks in the United States by Latinos, Puerto Ricans. There's some kind of conflict between the U.S. I'm not really aware of it. I haven't done detailed research, but there's a conflict between Puerto Ricans and the U.S., and that's where a lot of that occurred. The lowest percentage among the non-Muslims was 5%, and that was those terrorist attacks were initiated or done by communists. And then, surprisingly, many people may be surprised by this, although 6% of the terrorist attacks in the United States in this 25-year period were by Muslims, 7% were committed by extreme radical Jews. And so this Jewish group, and the Jewish group in particular, not just, it's not all Jews. They're part of the Abrahamic faith, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. So, but there's a particular group that the FBI considers a terrorist organization, and they're called the JDL, the Jewish Defense League. As a matter of fact, they moved their headquarters out of the United States, and they're in Canada now. So I put all these facts up according to the FBI because it's important to see the differences, and that we all have a problem, and we all have to contribute. We have to make our communities and our groups, our countries, our cultural backgrounds better. We all have to make the effort, and this is what P4E is trying to do. This is a part of what we're trying to do. The president of our organization in Toronto has established a really good relationship with government authorities and agencies in Canada, so we're trying to do our part to make sure that they see that we're productive members of the community and that we are trying to make it a better place. That also helps us with funding because they've written letters for us to help us to fund our organization and contribute to productive members of society. Now, some of you might say, well, what? This is 2000. That's 2005. That's 8 years ago. What about the current numbers and current statistics? Is there anything about Muslims regarding that and the contrast? There's a book that was written by Mark Kuzman, or Charles Kuzman. I'm sorry, Charles Kuzman. And you can Google his name and look up his book. But the book is called "The Missing Martyrs: Why There Are So Few Muslim Terrorists." Missing Martyrs: Why There Are So Few Muslim Terrorists. And one of the things that he points out is that there's an organization, Muslim organization, that he uses as part of his research called the Muslim Public Affairs Council. And what they pointed out was, since 9/11, there have been 135 plots in the U.S. Organized or committed by non-Muslims. 135. Since 9/11, and their latest report is April 2013, April of this year, and there have been 60 plots by Muslims. And I'm not sure what the percentages are as far as who are among the non-Muslims that have tried to carry out those plots or did carry them out. I'm sure his book will give more details about it. So this is why I decided to start P4E in the U.S. and to try to help Muslims in the area, Muslims in Madison, Rockford, Whitewater, in the entire area, and be a part of trying to eliminate the problem that we're having in the world and making it a better place. So after I finished in Dubai and I met Mohammed Heft, the president of our organization, I moved to Egypt in 2008 at Cairo, and I continued my studies there. Still had a place in Dubai, still staying in Dubai, and we were a part of the revolution. Not a part of it, but we actually celebrated with the Egyptians. So after Hosni Mubarak left his office, and so that was a very interesting experience. It was very tense at one moment, like it is now, and fortunately we're not there, but we still have an apartment there. And we went out, we celebrated with the Egyptians, and it was another experience of mine to see how when people come together and they're a part of a solution together, then it can produce amazing results. Because the Muslims would pray, the Christians would be around them to protect them or to guard them, and then when the Christians prayed, the Muslims would do the same thing. The church that was bombed in Alexandria was found out by the Egyptians when they got into some of the files of their intelligence agencies that it was actually Hosni Mubarak himself who orchestrated that bombing of the church in Alexandria. So it was an amazing show of unity, and hopefully they can bring that back. And that's what we should all be striving for, I think, in trying to solve some of the problems that we're seeing in the world today. So my wife and I have been coming back to Broadhead every year since 2009, and I love coming back. It's a wonderful place to be, especially in the summer. A little hot over there, and it gets hot and humid here, but it's not quite the same. So we enjoy it here, and we hope to be here more and more often. We'd like to plan to be here maybe 6 months out of the year, and then I go back and live there. We go back and live there for 6 months so that I can do fundraising for our organization. Just a couple things. I'm going to wrap up here pretty soon. It's getting kind of long. So one of the things that I wanted to discuss, as I mentioned in the beginning, was a little bit about Islam. And first of all, I'm not a scholar. I've been studying for 10 years, but off and on because of the work with the organization, and sometimes full-time, sometimes part-time. So, just like our education here in the United States, we have elementary, middle school, high school, bachelor's, master's, PhD. Not really until you get to a PhD are you considered a scholar or somebody who has a particular level of knowledge. And I would say I'm maybe around middle school, high school. But my wife, she's a different story. She studied 4 years in the UK. She got her certificate in Arabic language from a school. Yeah, I study independently with teachers, private lessons. She got her certificate from an Arabic language school institute in Cairo. And she's finishing up her degree with an institute in Dubai. When we're in Dubai, she attends the classes at the school. And they also have online learning, so while we're traveling, it's very convenient for her. So she's at a bachelor's level right now, and this is her last year. She'll be at a master's level when she finishes. So we hope that she can do that. So you can see that it takes a lot, and trying to learn the language itself, it's so different from English in so many ways, as I've explained. It takes a long time to get the basics of that, and then go into the depths of the other subjects, Islamic subjects. It takes a lot of time. So I'm still studying this, but more on a part-time level. So as far as the information I give you, it's still relevant, and it's still at a basic level. And with the Quran and what I've studied with the Quran, there's every chapter starts out with the phrase Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, with the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Every chapter starts with this phrase except for one, and that chapter has it inside of the chapter. It's one of the verses. So it's a very important part of what Muslims are reminded of, because that's what we have to say when we pray 5 times a day. That's how we begin our prayer. And in every prayer we have to recite the first chapter of the Quran, which is called Surah, the chapter Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter. And so I'm going to recite it for you, and you translate it. Again, it starts out, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, all praises to God, Lord of all the worlds, or of all creation, depending on how it's translated. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the most compassionate, the most merciful. So here we have it repeating itself in the beginning and within the chapter itself. So this first chapter, Al-Fatiha, the opening, most scholars say that this is the big picture of the Quran. You'll get the idea of the Quran in this one chapter, the understanding of what it is. So if in this chapter we're saying it twice, then you have an idea of what's coming in the rest of the chapters. And as I mentioned, it's mentioned in every chapter, and every chapter except one, it's in the beginning. Maliki Yawmiddin, master or owner of the day of judgment. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een. we only worship you and we only ask you for help. Now here we see a transition. We're talking about God up until this point. And in this verse, it switches. One half is about God. We only worship you and we only ask you for help. So now we're asking God for help, and it makes that transition. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Show us the straight path. So now we're asking God for guidance and help. Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim. Not the path of those who you have favored. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Not the path of those who have angered you or who have gone far astray. Ameen. Make it so. And this Ameen is similar to the Christian faith, where you say Amen. And it's the same thing, actually. Again, another connection with the Abrahamic faith, and another thing that I learned along the way that really amazed me and made me realize that this is one of the faiths and a true religion of God. To go into any more detail, I would like to invite you to our next program in 2 weeks on the 21st. And I'll have a guest with me. His name is Saleh Dwayne Urchin, and he's a Wisconsin native as well. And he lives in Beloit with his family. He's here year-round. He doesn't travel like me a lot throughout the year. And he's a supervisor for paramedics in Deerfield. So he's going to be here. We're going to talk about some basic Muslim beliefs and practices. So we'll go into a little bit more detail about what I just discussed here at the end, so it's a nice segue into the next program. And we want to discuss what we believe about God and the prophets, all the prophets from the first Adam to the last prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all. And also what kind of practices we have in the religion of Islam, what Muslims practice. So, for example, the prayer, some details about the prayer, fasting, mandatory charity that has to be given every year, and then making the trip to Mecca for pilgrimage once in a lifetime if you're healthy and you're financially stable. So that's about it, and I'd like to thank the National Endowment for Humanities and the Bridging Cultures Bookshelf, Muslim Journeys. I'd like to thank Nikki Bush back there in the corner, director of the library here, and for her help and everything that she's done to bring this grant to this library and this program as well. My parents for the help that they've given and all their support throughout the years. When I told them about Islam, it was very easy. Of course, it was before September 11th, so that made it a little easier. It was a little harder for a lot of Muslims after that. 1995 was a little different. So, and then my wife Halima, she's been a great source of support and encouragement. And so, I really thank you all for coming, and I hope you were able to get something out of this, learn something at least at a basic level. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
I'm just curious, just from growing up in a Christian faith, I have an idea of where the origin of the Bible and all of that stuff is. What is the origin of the Quran?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, we've talked a lot about the Quran today. That's a good question. The origin of the Quran is in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. And it was revealed to the last prophet, Muhammad. And actually, he was in a cave. He used to meditate a lot. He used to go away from the people. And you see this theme a lot with the prophets, from the first to the last. They go away they isolate themselves. And so he went to a cave, and at one time, during a long period of meditation and solitude, the Archangel Gabriel came to him and said, Iqra. That was the first thing that was revealed in the Quran. It's not in the first chapter, but it's the first word that was revealed, and Iqra means read or recite. And so for Muslims, education and learning is very, very important, and especially because that's the first thing that was revealed. Read, recite. Sometimes it's translated differently, but learn. And so we take that very seriously, and that was the origin of it. Yeah. Good question. Yes?
Do the same Sunnis and the Shiites and the Alawites use the same Quran.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's hard to understand why they can't live in peace
Separate.
with one another.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to understand why why religions can't live in peace in general. Every group, every religion has a group that seems to want to divide it, and I think that what you're saying is regarding the Sunnis and the Shiite. No, they don't use the same Quran, and this Quran is a Sunni Quran. And the Alawites you mentioned, you probably, it sounds like you're referring to Syria and the leader of Syria. You hear about that a lot. That's actually a group of Shiite. So he's actually a Shiite and involved in it with the Shiite group. And this Quran is Sunni, and most of the Muslims in the world, there's over 1.5 billion Muslims in the world, and the vast majority of them are Sunni. So I'm a Sunni Muslim, so this is the Quran that most of the Muslims use. Yeah.
Then do you have a figurehead, like Christianity has a pastor, or?
Yes, and the leader of most communities and most masajid or mosques, you call them mosques. I don't like to use the word mosque. It's got some cultural earmarks to it that a lot of Muslims don't like. It came from Spain, actually. It's not an Arabic word, and it had to do with the Spanish Inquisition. So we prefer to use masjid. Mosque actually means the house of a mosquito. And Ferdinand and Isabella, they wanted to swat the Muslims away like a mosquito. So we prefer the word masjid, and the plural is masajid. But anyways, an imam is a leader in the community. Now there are other leaders as well. For example, there's an emir. United Arab Emirates. Emirates means imarat in Arabic. Imarat, it means the emirs. And there's 7 states in UAE. Dubai is one of them. Abu Dhabi is another. There's another one called Sharjah, Fujairah. There's 7. And so there are political leaders. And that's not established really today. That's kind of a homage to the past. But in the past, ending with the Ottoman Turks in 1924, you had the Khalifa or Caliph, as we say in English, who would assign emirs to different places around the world where Muslims were ruling in different parts in different countries. So that's kind of the leadership role. And
Can you become that leader, or do you have to be born into Islam? Or?
Anybody can be, but usually you're given what's called in Islam an ijazah, or permission, a letter of permission by somebody who is much more knowledgeable that you've studied from, and then they give you permission. Here in the United States and Canada, if you know a little bit of Arabic and you know a little bit about Islam, you can be an imam in a masjid. But the bigger cities try to get an imam who's well qualified. But most masajid are in small towns like Beloit. Beloit has a Muslim center there, and it's a small little place, and because it's a small population of Muslims, then you just try to find the most qualified possible.
So did you have to take a proclamation or anything when you became
Yes.
Islam,
Yeah, and that's one of the first things that you have to do. You don't have to get baptized or go to any formal proceeding. For example, in some Christian faiths, you just have to make a statement with a Muslim who's sane and also is mature. Has to be an adult Muslim, and you say the Shahada with that person, and it just has to be one person. It can be on the phone. It can be on the
Write
internet.
that word down though.
I'm sorry.
The
Shahada.
Shahada?
Yeah, declaration of faith. Sometimes I say Arabic words. Thanks for saying that. I gotta. I'm trying to be conscious of that, and sometimes I'm not. So if somebody doesn't understand a word I say, please That's good. Yeah, it's shahada. In Arabic, I'll write it there. Maybe that'll be fun. So shahada, and Arabic is easier. It doesn't require as much space. I don't know. Also in Arabic, just getting off track here a little bit. With Arabic, it's very specific. It's like maybe some other languages. There's a male and a female. There's gender-specific words. For example, ash-shams, the sun. This is female. That's a feminine word. And al-qamar, the moon, is a male, a masculine connotation. So, and this particular word, because of this letter right here, it looks like an O. It looks like a person saying, "Ah," smiley face, kind of kind of picture there. That makes that a feminine word, shahada. So the shahada is a declaration of faith, and you have to say, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah." I testify there is no God except God. There's only one God, and that Muhammad is his messenger. And that's it. And it has to be with that particular individual. It can be on the internet. It can be on the phone. Anyway, as long as it's with that, there's a witness. And that's kind of what shahada is. It's a witnessing or a testification. And this is very important throughout Islam, because we see it when you become a Muslim. We see it when you get married. You have to have a witness. That's mandatory to get married. And you have to also have a witness in the Islamic courts of law. That's really important. It's essential in many cases to have that as a part of the proceedings and before a verdict is determined.
So are you baptized in water, like
No.
Christian? Oh, but you use the word baptism.
I use the word baptism.
I thought you did.
So
No.
you say you don't have to baptize.
We don't have to get baptized, I said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
How do Muslims view Jesus?
Oh, that's a good question. You'll find that in the Quran here. You'll see if you take one. There's a chapter here called the chapter Mary. That's the mother of Jesus, and it's devoted entirely for Jesus' mother Mary. So we take it very seriously, and many things are mentioned about Jesus in that chapter. We believe Jesus was born without a father, born by Mary. He spoke in the cradle, so he had many miracles, medical type miracles. We believe that he was a prophet. He was the Messiah. He is the Messiah. We believe he still is alive today. We believe he's in heaven, and we believe he'll return again. So many, many similarities, and we just don't take it to the level where he was the Son of God or God himself. So there's a lot of connections, but differences as well.
Your wife, did she have to do the is it for the women also besides the men?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody who wants to become a
Male
Muslim.
Muslim, so it doesn't,
Yep.
male or female?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. But she didn't necessarily have to. She was born into a Muslim family, and she's from England. And her ethnic background is Bengali from Bangladesh. And because of that, you're just naturally brought into that because you're praying and you're already making those declarations already, and it's understood that you're Muslim. Uh-huh.
Go ahead.
Well, you mentioned this is a Sunni Quran.
That's her.
What's the difference? What accounts for the differences?
Yeah, well, I'm having a hard enough time studying the Sunni Quran. And I haven't actually seen a Shiite Quran. But the big difference is that they question, as far as the Qurans I can't really say, but the main principle is that they question the leadership of the Muslims after the death of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So they have some serious questions about some of the companions that were with Prophet Muhammad. So many Sunnis think that this is inappropriate and wrong and actually kind of a blasphemy, because it would be like saying something against the apostles of Jesus and saying, I mean, it's really serious. And we don't believe anything can be said in a disparaging way that they did something awful or went against Prophet Muhammad in any way, those who studied with him and lived with him. Yeah.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, regarding like the difference between the Sunni and the Shia Quran, would it be fair to say that like the actual script would be the same, but the explanation by the scholars is different? So the interpretation is different?
Yeah,
Sure.
I would say that, but there are some changes that have been made in the Quran and in the different Qurans, but for the most part, that is the case. And again, the changes are mostly in the translation. And so if that's what you mean by the explanation, then maybe that's true. But when you change the translation, sometimes it leads to some serious problems. Part of what he's talking about is in Islam, to establish something, it's not unlike any other field of study. You have a tradition. You have some foundational books that are usually very old in a particular study. So, for example, when you go to university, you start out with 101 whatever, art, for example, and at a basic level. Once you advance to the higher levels, you usually may be studying some more detailed books, some more difficult books, and in Islam, those are the older books. So you're studying from hundreds of years of tradition of older scholars, and that's what establishes it. And so if we look at the hundreds of years of scholars and we see what they were saying and how the Quran should be understood, and we learn from their books, then we have a picture, we have an idea of what the Quran means and what Islam actually is. Yeah. Okay.
When did the split occur between the Shia?
Oh, a long time ago. But actually,
shortly after Muhammad's death?
No, yeah, it was a little bit later than that, but it was at the time of when the companions were still alive, the companions of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him,
And they questioned if they were
the leadership,
true
because
to
it all started with who should take the leadership after Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Are you saying that the Shiites are probably more of the terrorist side of it? Or are you afraid to even say that?
No, I'm not afraid to say that, but I don't want to lump everybody into one group, and I wouldn't do that. So no, I don't think that's the case. It just so happens, for example, Bashar al-Assad, he happens to be doing what he's doing, and he's among the Shiite. But we've got Hosni Mubarak, who claims to be a Sunni, and he's done some horrible things to the Egyptians in the past. And so, it's just, we see it everywhere, and there are many Shiite that they have different beliefs among themselves.
Well, thank you for doing this, because unfortunately, most of the Muslims do stereotype them, and we need more people like you.
Yes.
Really, because that's the problem. We are getting all of this from the internet, from the television, everywhere, and all we hear is the negative part. We need people like you so we don't stereotype. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, well, you're welcome.
We need more of you.
Sure. Oh, what you're saying is very good, and I wanted to discuss that in my talk, and I forgot about it. But here's all the news organizations. This is in our portfolio that we use for fundraising overseas. Here's all the news organizations and media outlets that the president of Canada, for our organization, has been involved in. Has anybody here heard of Mohammed Robert Heft before today? Okay, we have on here BBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, PBS, as well as print media. How come nobody's heard of him? He's speaking out against terrorism. One of the things that I hear all the time, and I read it years ago, my mother gives me news clippings all the time about Islam and Muslims, and one of the things that I read was, why aren't Muslims saying more against terrorism? And I've had airline attendants on planes ask me that are European or North American, why aren't you saying more? I've heard it in the media. I actually had a dinner with somebody in Madison during this trip, and while we were talking, she said, I heard, I was watching this program, and the person that they were interviewing said, Muslims need to do more to stand up against terrorism. And she said, I thought about what he said, and so you should think about that and try to do more of what you're going to do for your talks. The problem is, and what I ask a lot of people that come to me and say that, I say, is it that, or is it because you haven't heard anything about it. And so then I asked them, who do you know that's speaking out against it? Well, that's why I'm asking you. I haven't heard anything. Okay. Well, for example, has anybody heard? I'll give two main people that a lot of Muslims around the world know who speak out against terrorism and are on news outlets, major mainstream media news. Has anybody heard of Hamza Yusuf Hansen? He's a new Muslim, but he's been a new Muslim for a long time. So he's an old new Muslim. Anybody heard of him? One. Are you Muslim? Okay.
But I know Hamza since 1990s.
Yeah, he knows him. He's Muslim too. So you see how popular he is among the Muslims that are in the room. I didn't see. Did you raise your hand? I didn't look over here. He's in California. He studied 10 years overseas. Very knowledgeable, extremely knowledgeable. If you think my Arabic's good, it's horrible compared to his. He sounds like an Arab. He was born in Washington State. He's a Caucasian Muslim, like me. Studied 10 years, part of the time in the Middle East, most of the time in West Africa. He started a college, maybe you've heard of this, at the University of California, Berkeley, called Zaytuna College. It's an Islamic university. It's been in the media a lot. He's been in a lot of mainstream media. Now, I keep saying that they're showing up in mainstream media, but you're saying you're not hearing from them. What happens is, the media will do an interview with somebody, but other outlets won't pick that up. Like the AP. Anybody heard of AP, Associated Press? Heard of Reuters? Okay? They don't pick that up and spread it around the world or around the country. These are American Muslims, and they're knowledgeable, and they're standing up against terrorism. Another one on the East Coast is Siraj Wahaj. Kind of a neat name, isn't it? Siraj Wahaj. Sounds poetic. He is in New York City. He's an imam, I mentioned imam before, at a masjid in Brooklyn. I've had the opportunity to meet him face to face and get to know him in 2001, just before the September 11th. And he's an African American Muslim, very knowledgeable. He studied overseas, not as long as Hamza Yusuf. But he speaks out frequently. He was interviewed by 60 Minutes just days after September 11th, along with Hamza Yusuf, and they were talking about how Islam does not promote terrorism, and Muslims, the majority of Muslims aren't terrorists, but we haven't heard of him. I mentioned Muhammad Robert Heft in Canada. He's advocating, I showed you the media outlets that he's been involved with, spreading the message of what Islam is and what it isn't. Has anybody heard of Timothy, and this will be the last one, Timothy Winters? Anybody here? Okay, Professor Timothy Winters from Cambridge University. His Muslim name is Abdul Hakim Murad. Timothy Winters. He's a professor at Cambridge. He's on the media all the time. He has a forum to be able to spread this message, and he does. And yet, many people haven't heard of him. So my question is, why isn't the media focusing on this positive message? Well, does anybody know how media works?
Yes, everybody.
That's right. Exactly. That's a good phrase. I like that one. Right. The bad stuff sells. So if you got an hour of news, you get a nice little special interest story for 5 minutes after 55 minutes of horror. It's like watching a horror movie, right? And unfortunately, then they get these radical Muslims, interviewing these radical Muslims, sometimes debating with other Muslims who are trying to present the right message and a peaceful message, and the emphasis seems to be on those who are more radical because they speak the loudest and say the worst.
Can you speak to the role and the changing role, perhaps, of women?
Oh, yeah. I was going to address that. I'm glad you asked that.
Particularly of the media and iPads and information that flows so freely around the world.
Maybe so, and this relates to what we're talking about. You've heard of this concept of, okay, first of all, maybe some of you have heard this verse in the Quran called, where it's mentioned that kill the infidels wherever you find them. Maybe. Okay. Everybody saying yeah. Have you ever heard of the verse, if you kill one person, it's as though you've killed all of humanity? Raise your hand. Only a few, but most of you I heard hearing the first one. Okay, now where did I get that from? Well, obviously the Quran, but also, anybody know who Bill Maher is?
Yes.
Politically incorrect. Okay. Definitely, and the emphasis on incorrect. He interviewed Ellison, Keith Ellison,
Minnesota.
Congressman Ellison. You know who he is? He's a Muslim. He had him on, and he quoted this verse. Congressman Ellison quoted the second verse that I just quoted. So you can't just take the English version of the Quran. It's nice for some spiritual guidance and for some inspiration, but to try to understand how Muslims practice and how we're governed by the rule of law can't be done unless you go to a qualified scholar. And that's what Congressman Ellison was trying to portray to his audience and to Bill Maher himself, because he really swayed. He's not really big on religion anyways. He's actually very against it, very harsh against it.
How can millions of Muslims go to a qualified leader to teach what you're teaching?
Well, a lot of them do, and really it's through the traditional education and these madrasas and learning the proper way to practice Islam and how to treat other people with compassion and mercy. You know, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he was tortured, like all the prophets were. They were tortured in one way or another, and by their own people. And that was in Mecca. For 13 years he stayed in Mecca under these conditions. The last 3 years was under an extreme sanction where they were put out in the desert with no food or anything. Babies were starving. And when they finally were able to leave Mecca to go to Medina in Saudi Arabia, after about 10 years they gained power. They were gaining strength. He went back to Mecca with 10,000 companions. At that time, that was a lot. And they came to Mecca. The people of Mecca were fleeing to other countries. And that wasn't easy travel back then. They were leaving. They were afraid other people stayed. And he gave immunity to everybody there. And nobody was to be killed. Everybody was allowed to be safe. So, the message that we get about Muhammad sometimes is really, especially here, really discourages me sometimes, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, because when we do learn about these things and we do know what it is and we do know how we're supposed to be treating others, even our enemies, then it's a very different message than what you hear from some politicians, not all, but some politicians and a lot of media.
Back to the question about women.
I don't know how I got off that topic.
You only got an hour, yeah.
So the women, as far as the women go, one of the things that I wanted to mention about that was that we hear about this concept of killing and getting rewarded if you die in the process of doing that, and you get all these rewards in the next life. But really, the first martyr in Islam, after Islam, the Quran was revealed to Prophet Muhammad, was a woman. And a lot of people, you hear about men getting these virgins in paradise, but the first one who died for Islam was a woman, by the people who were torturing and persecuting Prophet Muhammad and his companions, peace be upon him. So there's a high status for women. One of the scholars at the time of Prophet Muhammad, was his wife, Aisha, and she was a scholar in Islam. She was teaching men. Do we ever hear that here? Does anybody ever understand the level that women have? My wife is more knowledgeable than me, and she didn't get that after marrying me, and I forced her to become educated. She did that on her own. As a matter of fact, her family wasn't practicing very well and wasn't learning. She went off on her own to a town in the north of England to study the religion. Her sister followed her and actually graduated from that school. And so another great example is Fatima Fihri. Fatima Fihri, she is a Moroccan. She inherited a lot of money from her father, and what she did was she built the oldest continuing university in the world in Fez, Morocco. And so the emphasis on education and women learning. In Islam, many of the scholars have said the first teachers of most people are women. And so the woman has a very high level and a high status in Islam. And again, that's the religion. Now, if you want to talk about the people, that's a whole different thing.
That I was going to contrast that wonderful view of it to what's happening in Afghanistan, where an effort has been made for the last 10 years to try and educate women, and then there's a lot of backsliding, putting it nicely. They're blowing up young girls who go to school and crushing their spirits.
But that's political, not religious.
Well, and there's family things associated. It's a social problem. There's a lot of issues. But we've got that problem in a lot of faiths. We've got domestic violence, and people calling themselves Christian. We've got children being abused by certain leaders in the faith. And so that's Pastor Petter. I saw you raise your hand.
Oh, I was, when we were talking about Muslims standing up against terrorism, I just had less of a question, more of a statement that as important it is for Muslims to stand up against that, it's also important for non-Muslims to bear witness to the reality that you're sharing with us. That all of us that are here experiencing this, the good that we can do in changing and breaking those stereotypes by going out and sharing with our neighbors and the people that we encounter. When we hear people make these statements of stereotyping Muslims as being terrible people and terrorists and all of that. For us to be able to stand up and say, no, you're wrong about that, and let me tell you why. And, I think that's really important.
That's good. And Pastor Petter, he's a pastor of Bethlehem Lutheran Church. His sister is married to a Muslim, so he kind of has a personal experience with this and understands what I'm talking about. Why am I here in Broadhead? Why am I doing this lecture? Why am I establishing P4E in Wisconsin? There are Muslims in the community. You may not know it, but they're here. And they're surrounding the community as well, and they're good people, and many of them are shy to even let people know that they're Muslim because of the things in the media. I was sitting with a Muslim family a year or two ago in their home, in a family in the area, and at that time something came on the news about Muslims and something horrible, and you could just feel it right then when we're all sitting there, how they were feeling. Foreign exchange students, every once in a while Broadhead High School gets a foreign exchange student from a Muslim country. Embrace them, ask them how they're doing, get to know them, and hopefully if we can establish something here in Broadhead, they'll have a place to go to read Quran or to pray and have a place to kind of focus on their religion in solitude, quietly. You can focus on religion anywhere, but to have a place to go is always nice. So. Any more questions? Okay.
I just have a little question about your attire.
Yeah.
Obviously, not all Muslims wear the garb. I don't know.
No, you're
but
right.
Obviously, if we don't know that they are Muslim, then obviously they don't look like you and Halima. Why is that?
Well, it's that's a very complex question or answer actually, but it has a lot to do with. Well, for example, you'll see a lot of Muslims overseas dressing in a Western style, t-shirt, jeans, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. They're still Muslim, and it's not. It's what they choose. I mentioned Timothy Winters earlier, Abdullah Murad from Cambridge. I read an article from him once, and he talked about the history of empires or world powers in the world and how people mimic the dress. They use the language even. They'll even do many similar things to the world power of the time. At the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, it was the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire, predominantly, at that time, 1,400 years ago. So you'd see people dressing like that, using the language, and it became the kind of the zeitgeist, or spirit of the times, or the way that people acted and spoke at the time. For the Muslims, when we were powerful in Spain, then a lot of Muslims were working with Jews and Christians to develop science and the sciences. So Europe was going through the Dark Ages at the time. Many Europeans were going to Spain and learning these books because it's not like now where you can print off books. They went there to study, and to have a book was something of a jewel at the time. To have something very valuable, and so they would go there, and you would see them dressing like them, and they learned the Arabic language, and because the Muslims were at a certain, especially in terms of intelligence and academia, they're at a certain level that other parts of the world weren't at the time when they ruled Spain and for about 800 years. So you see that all the time. When there's a world power, there's an influence, and you'll see people doing things similarly. So I think that has a lot to do with it, but there are other issues as well regarding that. There's somebody else that raised their hand.
Do you have
Just a
holidays?
couple more questions. I'm
Do
sorry.
you have holidays?
Oh yeah, we just finished one, and we're going to have one in about a month or two. We finished the month of Ramadan, and this will be discussed in 2 weeks in more detail. And we had our Eid holiday. It's called Eid, and it's spelled like this: Eid, and Eid al-Fitr, which is the holiday of Ramadan, the month of fasting. It's the end of the month. And then we have one at the end of pilgrimage, which is during the month of Dhul Hijjah, and the first 10 days are the month of pilgrimage, and at the end of those 10 days, all Muslims have a celebration, not just those who go to Mecca for pilgrimage. I saw one more over here somewhere.
Kind of an odd question, but in Christianity, people are called Christians. In Islam, they're called Muslims.
Yeah.
What is that from?
Yeah, it's from the root word salama, which is that's where you get Islam, and then you get Muslims. So the Muslim is the one who is prostrates or is in submission to God, one who submits to God. And Islam is peaceful submission, and Islam is the religion of peace. It comes from this word peace, salim, salam. When Muslims greet, we say assalamu alaikum, peace be to you, and assalam. This comes from that root word.
I also apologize for the disturbance. The phone.
Oh no problem. No, that happens everywhere now. Yeah.
I'd just like to share our appreciation for what you're doing.
Nice.
Education is major.
Yeah.
We're with the Diversity Action Team in Janesville, in Rock County.
Okay.
And on the 21st, we're going to be having a peace event at Peace Park. And it's okay, I'd like to leave some information. But when there are people of like hearts that come together, no matter what faith, we are strengthened. And this our Saturday event, September 21st, will be...
Oh, great. What time is that?
1 to 4.
Oh, great. So you come here at 9:30
That's
for
right.
all day night, and you go there at 1:30.
There you go.
And the speaker there will be RG from the Sikh temple in Milwaukee.
Oh, right. I wanted to go to I don't like to call it anniversary, but their remembrance, their 1-year remembrance. But I was providing food for the end of our day of fasting to a community, I think Rockford at the time, but I really wanted to go to that. I want to go to that community before I leave too. But thank you. I really appreciate that. Actually, Pastor Petter and I have had some great conversations. And Saleh, who hopefully you'll meet on the 21st, he and I had an interfaith a few years ago at an Islamic center in Madison, and we had a Jewish professor from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We had a couple of, we had a pastor, a priest, we had a Hindu representative. We invited a Native American, but unfortunately he wasn't able to make it. And so we tried to bring all kinds of faiths, and we had a discussion about what our goal should be, trying to move forward and from that meeting. So I advocate for that, and I'm working with Pastor Petter right now and the director of the library, Nikki, to try to do that here in Broadhead and in the area as well, because I think that's really important. If we all take part, as faiths, we're never going to agree 100%. We never may join together or join one religion or the other. So there's always going to be barriers. The important thing is that those barriers are brought down, because they're going to be there. But we all have common goals, right? We all want peace, I hope. I do. But you can't have peace with justice. There's going to be bad people in the world. There's going to be evil. And like Christians and Muslims, we believe Jesus will come again and it'll be peaceful. But the point is that how do you get to that process? Well, you can't start without yourself first, and then your families, and then the community. It's got to be a growing process. So that's what we really tried to focus on. I agree with you 100%. Interfaith is really important in working together in communities. There's one more.
Yeah, just, I'm assuming you've been to Mecca.
Yeah, many
Okay,
times.
I'm assuming you're right there, you would.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me what the box is?
The box?
What's in there? Well, that's what it looks like to me. I mean, explain what it is and what's there and why you go there.
Okay, really that we'll explain more on the 21st
Okay, well
when
then-
we talk about pilgrimage, but I'll just tell you what it
Okay.
is just right now. It's the Kaaba, and let's try it over here. So it's the Kaaba, and that is that's the first house of God, as we as Muslims believe, and it was built by Abraham. And as a matter of fact, there's a stone there where his footprints are still today, and you can see it through a glass, an enclosing that's glass. And the understanding is, according to the scholars, is that the Kaaba is about 3 stories high. It looks small when you're looking at it because all the big buildings around in Mecca, but it's 3 stories high. So how did Abraham get to the top? And that hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years ago, God put him on a stone and it elevated so that you could put the stones at higher levels. And so it was made soft for him so it wouldn't be uncomfortable for him. And so that's the understanding. So this was first built by Abraham and his son Ishmael. And from that point on, one of his wives stayed there, and then people started coming because there was a water source. And then when Islam came around, then Prophet Muhammad was born, and that became the focal point for Muslims.
Thank you.
Okay, Nikki has one thing to say here. So.
Well, first I'd like to start off by saying thank you so much for coming, and thank you especially to our speaker, Matt Abdullah. It's an honor to have you speak with us today. Hearing some of your questions, being a librarian, I couldn't help but grab some of the books that we have in the back that I think I could speak to some of them. One question was sort of some background on the Quran, how did it get to be? We have, these are all from the grant that we received, the story of the Quran, its history and place in Muslim life. Then regarding Sunni and Shiites, we have the Columbia Source Book of Muslims that has a bit of information in there. This is the index at the back, it'll put you right to the pages. And women, the veil's resurgence from the Middle East to America, a quiet revolution. Maybe you might find some of these of interest. They're available to check out, as are numerous others. We don't have them all in right now. It's been circulating.
Yeah.
Sorry, I did not want to detract from your speech, but I wanted to make sure that you know that there are further resources available.
Thanks, Nikki. Is there any more questions? Everybody wants to say. Okay, don't forget.